Welcome to Senate Corporations. Roll call.
Senator Boner.
Here.
Senator Case.
Present.
Senator Nethercott.
Here.
Senator Scott
Here.
and Chairman Driscoll.
Here. We have a quorum. Welcome, everyone. We're going to take up House Bill 100 redistricting. In front of us, we have Chairman Zwanitzer and Representative Duncan, both off of House Corps and part of the engineers of the change in the plan, and they're going to start us out on the day to present what's happened since it left the committee and gone through the House and come to this body. So you have the floor.
All right. Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, fellow corporations members of the Senate. Always good to see you. We did have 6 changes, amendments that went through on the House side. I might skip over the background of the bill, as I know you're all very well aware of the interim process we went through and the reasons behind redistricting, et cetera. So let me just, if there's no immediate questions, I'll just go through the amendments the House put onto the plan. The first amendment on committee of the whole, and certainly the most significant, was the issue we dealt with in the interim, for the entirety. And it was really on Weston County and whether it should be whole or split. And so in the House, the amendment was brought by the good representative from Goshen County to my right, to basically split Weston County in half, give Campbell County 5 full districts within Campbell County, and have more of what was referred to as the status quo, like we've had the past 10 years, where Crook County went into the north part of Weston, the south part of Weston went into Goshen and Niobrara. So to do that, basically you did give 5 whole districts into Campbell County, and then at the bottom part, Goshen County is now only divided into 2. That did bring in about 2,200 people that Laramie County wasn't necessarily expecting, all into Laramie County, which was tough to argue with. So we're all at 4% below deviation now, the 10 House districts or 11 House districts in Laramie County. And so most of the amendments from there did center around kind of that somewhat unexpected shift and scramble. So that's the first part, was the dividing Weston in half. The second amendment, which is also, I think, before you today, was brought from legislators from Sheridan and Johnson County. As you're aware, in the interim, when we went to a 62-31 plan, we did take the area generally known as the Sheridan 3 school district and put that in with Campbell County. The Sheridan and Johnson County delegation brought an amendment to put that area of Eastern Sheridan County back into Sheridan and Johnson, but be above deviation. That did cause some concerns, and so we had 2 subsequent amendments, both of which failed, on whether A, we should keep that amendment and have those districts above deviation, which was agreed to. They tried to go back the other way, and the House was pretty firm on they didn't want to go that route. We also had another amendment brought by our majority floor leader that would have realigned our districts at the lower end of deviation, and so that no district would be more than below 3.8, I think, roughly, to keep that 10% deviation across the board. That was going to affect, I think, 20 to 21 different districts, to realign them to keep them within that 10% deviation. That also failed. And so the map we sent to you is out of deviation in Sheridan and Johnson counties. And I know that'll be some discussion here today. A couple of other quick amendments. We did have an amendment change from Sweetwater County that realigned to Green River. There were some concerns when the county clerk issued that plan the Friday before session. There were some more realignments that legislators felt were needed. So some quick things in the Green River part of Sweetwater County. Didn't have a lot of conversation. We did have 2 other amendments in Laramie County. As I said, we did struggle a bit on 3 readings to realign my county and accommodate kind of that change. And so 3 of our legislators got together on second reading and they realigned 3 districts in Laramie County in line with some of our precincts and our wards recommended by the county clerks. And the 2 other districts really was just a shift of population of 500, both sides. Both legislators felt that it was better for their existing constituencies to have that change. And then we had 1 small change in Campbell County. We literally moved a line over a block or 2. And there was no residents in that block, but it was some commercial businesses, and it was a catch from the clerk and Representative Bear. I know I'm jumping around the state quickly, sorry, Mr. Swink. And then the last amendment on third reading, again affecting Laramie County. As you all know, we heard from a large number of constituents in Laramie County from what we call the South Side. And that constituent group, they were perhaps not very pleased with the amendment brought on first reading on how we realigned the south side of Cheyenne. And so we attempted, after about 4 of us received 80 emails and text messages at all hours, to find a better working arrangement for Southern Laramie County, which gives you the shape we now have before you. We even had a corrected copy on third reading. And so that was the best attempt on a third reading amendment to align those districts to stay within deviation, accommodate the request from a large number of constituents in Cheyenne who thought that was, as close as we could get on third reading to being representative of how they wanted certain districts to look. So I know that's a slightly odd shape, primarily because of 3 major census blocks that are fairly large. We could certainly go into if you want, but that's the plan that we sent over to you. I would say, as I mentioned earlier, we did discuss putting Sheridan and Johnson County back into alignment. That did not seem to go over well in the House. And then we did discuss going back to a 60-30 plan. I believe that was a fairly resounding 10 to 50 that we wanted to stay with a 62-31 plan in the House after considerable debate. We thought that was best to move forward. So those are the major amendments we did in the House. Happy to answer any questions. Also brought Representative Duncan with me, as she was the bringer of kind of the most significant change to the east side of the state from where you saw it in the interim.
Let's go ahead and go to Representative Duncan, then we'll go to questions if you would like to add on and explain your amendment real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Essentially, what we did is we just tried to stay as status quo as possible, keeping Campbell County whole, that we kept hearing throughout the interim, and working our way down the east side. So moving Platte into northern Laramie, Goshen, Niobrara, and Weston split, and sharing, which is what we currently have. So.
Very good. Questions? Questions?
Mr. Chairman? Thank you. Just for clarification, Goshen is no longer sharing with Laramie County. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Nethercott, no. Goshen is now sharing with Niobrara as they currently are.
Is there going to be applause for that in the room? I see the same people who were with us during the interim who advocated for that. It looks like there's success on that front. The two shall not cross. So further questions, I think, for me from the House position about how the House reached the conclusion in violation of the committee's principle that any area would be out of deviation.
And Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, we do have the bringer of that amendment, and we had robust discussion. And as I said, that was a committee of the whole amendment. We talked about it again in second and third readings. And ultimately, the discussion was if the legislature talks about it and had good discussion and a lawsuit was brought, we legitimately discussed it and had a decision from the House that being out of deviation in that regard was agreeable to the body. So it was.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I will address this question to Sheridan and Johnson County legislators who are advocating for the state plan to be out of deviation. And I find that completely unacceptable when we have added 3 legislators in order to accomplish some of these challenges. There should be absolutely no reason when we add 2 new House members to the state that anywhere should be deviation. So we will have to get that fixed.
Fix for it. I feel the same way. Senator Boner.
And just a quick follow-up, maybe a little bit more discussion. I mean, there has to be an actual reason why you're out of deviation. What was the justification of, the Bighorn Basin? I understood that there's several mountain ranges. There's the Wind River Reservation we have to be cognizant of that we're kind of having a setback when we had the 30 or the 60-30 plan. I could have justified that. What's the justification for this?
And Mr. Chairman, Representative Craig, who brought the amendment, is here. If we would turn it over to him.
Representative Crago, it appears the pressure's on you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You have the floor.
Senators Committee. So, I mean, first of all, there's a lot of case law out there regarding this issue, and we get stuck on numbers. And if we start looking at actual case law, the 10% it's a goal, right? It's not mandatory. And I think we have to keep that in mind. And this is what we talked about at the other end of the hall, was where the case law leads us. There's actually a United States Supreme Court case regarding Wyoming. Senator Scott probably remembers that he was probably here when that particular redistricting happened. What the United States Supreme Court said is you can be outside the 10% as long as there's a legitimate state interest. Our argument is, from our particular neighborhood, is we're trying to keep political subdivisions together, as are other counties, correct? We are just wanting to keep Sheridan and Johnson whole, as they have been for the last however many years, long time. I don't know how long, but that's the way it's been for quite a while. So that's our argument. We're also talking about communities of interest, which is one of the other principles. All those people in Claremont and Arvada do business in Johnson County or Sheridan County. Very few of them go to Campbell County for business. They've asked us to try to keep that whole, and that's what we've done with our amendment on the other end. If you actually go back and read the case law, which I would urge you to do at some point, it talks about the burden. And that's all the 10% number does, is shift the burden. Doesn't keep us from getting sued. We may get sued no matter where we are. If we have a legitimate state interest for going outside the 10%, it will be upheld as constitutional. If we don't, it won't. And so we can sit here and talk about the fact that we went to 60. I'm ready. There's a reason we're at 62-31. It was because if we, under other plans, we were going to be out of deviation in other parts of the state. I remember listening back to one of your very first joint interim meetings, and you talked about allowing other parts of the state to be out of deviation over the mountain from us. That was one of you went down that road at one point under the 60-30 plan, correct? That plan suited us just fine. We were within deviation under that plan, and we're able to keep within our goals. Under this plan, we weren't able to without being outside of deviation.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Mayor Bonner.
So thanks for the review. I'm just a sheep herder, but I think I understand the differences after, of the burden of proof and how that shifts it once you go above 10%. So to my understanding, your justification is you want your county to be whole. That's it. Yes or no? That's the justification.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bonner, that's one of the reasons. There are other reasons. Communities of interest would be the other one. Geographical reasons.
Senator Scott.
Someday I'm gonna bring in a big hammer and persuade that thing.
It'll work once.
Mr. Chairman, the case referred to in Wyoming was Brown v. Thompson. I'm familiar with that case because that was the first personal bill I ever got all the way through the legislature. And it is not generally regarded as holding significant precedential value because the plaintiffs focus solely on the issue of should Niobrara County have its own representative and did not attack the full plan. And the court essentially said one member, not the whole plan under assault. It was not as sufficient of a problem to justify throwing out the whole plan. It might have precedential value if we had a single case out of deviation where that was the only thing in the plan that was attacked. But I don't think you can count on the lawyers being that, well, I won't say, bad again in their presentation. I think it's well understood what went wrong in that case. There have been a few others, but I think, Mr. Chairman, I think the issue of the burden on proving constitutionality is key here. And I would like to hear from one of our LSO attorneys, either Matt Albright or
I'll decline.
No,
We've plowed this ground at prior meetings, and that's the stance Representative Crago took was exactly the one I took. I read the case law. Committee disagreed with me, and particularly on this side. That's really why the deviation plans went away. Was I very directly side with where you're at in your argument. Frankly, I don't think it holds any water on the Senate side at this point. So I don't see any sense of plowing ground again that we've been through on the committee ad nauseum. So let's stick to the current plan. We've got your explanation. And we'll weigh it as we go through, obviously, but we'll see what the committee has to say. I'll give you a final comment if you'd like one,
Just to say thank you for the time.
because I'm exactly where you're at. So with that, any further questions? Any of them? Senator Nethercott.
A quick comment, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and hate to belabor the point. The committee is well versed on the case law surrounding redistricting. Every person who's come to testify provided us a legal lesson, in addition to LSO and in addition to our own capacity to do so. The committee's decision wasn't based on whether or not we could do something that could be legal, right? Could we get away with it and how the court would ultimately decide? That was not our guiding principle, was whether or not we could push the law and ultimately be successful in a court case. The analysis was what was best for Wyoming and to stay safely within those deviation standards so that Wyoming had equal representation across the state, meaning no area was outside of that deviation as a standard. And we had to compromise in a way that I don't think any of us really like, which was growing the legislature. I don't particularly like that, but it's a place that we ended up. And so I do, again, to reiterate, appreciate the legal analysis. The committee understands the law. But it's just unacceptable to have an area out of deviation with adding 3 new legislators to the state.
Further comment, anybody? Okay, thank you. Senator Scott, did you have something?
I've got a question on a different subject, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Wait,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'd asked a couple times.
oh, I'd kind of like to reach out to the chairman of the House side and find out what he's thinking he would do if he were on this side.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Case. All along, I certainly believe we should have a plan in deviation. I think that is our guiding principle. Part of the 6231 was really to put the basin in deviation. That was a conversation we had for 5 months. And really, as I've looked at the plan, we start with the basin, right? And if we don't put the basin in deviation, it draws into your county, which forces your county and ricochets through the map. And so I agree with Senator Nethercott that first and foremost, one man, one vote. And second is keeping everything in deviation. I did appreciate the communities of interest argument that Sheridan and Johnson County brought. I think they made their case on the community of interest point that Sheridan School District 3, what I refer to that part, really does go to Johnson County, does not go to Campbell County for many things. But ultimately, I do believe it's best to have a plan in deviation. If that was where you were.
Well, yeah, please, Mr. Chairman. So okay, so let's, what do we do now with the plan in eastern Wyoming as it came out of your body? And then do we just reverse the amendment about Sheridan Johnson County, or does that still leave us hanging out there? How do we move forward to fix this?
Mr. Chairman, in your case, so I wouldn't want to use the word fix, right? It's a political process. It's evolving and we'll take everything into account.
The fix is in, I'm sorry.
I would reiterate that I think every legislator of the Duncan Amendment, right, all 5 Campbell County legislators, the 2 that represent Weston now and Goshen all made a pretty strong case. That's how they wanted it in the House. And it was difficult for the 10 legislators in Laramie County to say we didn't like it when it was actually a benefit to our county. And so I believe that was pretty strongly held in the House, that change. And that's an issue we wrestled with all interim. The deviation argument, I look forward to the good work of the Senate to do what you think is best. And I will take that back to the House in a good faith effort and see if we would concur.
Thank you for the blank check.
One more try. So given what happened in Eastern County or Eastern Wyoming, Laramie County and North, if we accepted that and trying to move forward and get Sheridan County back in deviation, what would we do exactly?
Mr. Chairman, in your case, in my opinion, you would just take out the amendment that the House put on. It would put the plan back in deviation in Sheridan and Johnson County. That part was not part of the committee of the whole amendment number 1 that split Weston. The Sheridan Johnson issue was a different issue, and I believe it'd be at your discretion, but a fairly easy reversal of the amendment we put on. Take it off and put it back into deviation and have Sheridan School District 3 go to Campbell County. I know that's not what they want, but I think a lot of areas of the state did not get what they wanted completely in this plan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We now have 2 Western counties. Works well. Senator Scott.
Two points I think we need to consider. The 3162 plan, it solved our problem with deviations in the Bighorn Basin, but it then created this problem. And in my experience of drawing these plans over the years, I think at any reasonable size of the legislature, you're going to find some characteristic where you've got a region where you're doing something that will appear to the people involved to be just irrational. It's just in the nature of the beast of getting the population equal. So if you went to 64 House members, I think you'd still find it'd be a different region probably, but something would be just plain wouldn't fit very well. So I think it's just something we're going to have to live with. I've explored much larger units, Mr. Chairman, and they all have something like this to them. It'd be a matter of luck if they didn't. Mr.
No,
Chairman.
it just didn't happen. We went through 40 plans. Somebody gets hurt in any plan we do. That's why the committee went through 40 or 50 plans. Is under every plan, there is 1 or 2 regions that come out losers. And that's really what we're doing is you're picking winners and losers at the end. You said it, the delegation that did the best on the floor won at the end of the day on the amendment.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott.
The next legal question I have is, suppose what we wind up with is the Senate chooses a plan that is within deviation. The House chooses a plan, chosen a plan that is out of deviation. Is the fact the House plans out of deviation, do we lose the presumption of constitutionality for the Senate plan as well, or would that tend to limit the attack legally in courts to the House plan?
Senator Scott,
And that's a question I'm really looking at Mr. Albright to maybe enlighten us a bit.
I think I can answer from my end. This is a committee bill. This isn't a House and a Senate bill. This is a committee bill, and we amend it to bring it back in deviation, and conference will decide whether we're in deviation or not. I really don't want to go down the decisive path that the Senate picks a plan and the House picks a plan. It's our job today to do the plan in the Senate's eyes. This is Senate corpse. We brought the House in to tell us. And my intent is to come out of this committee and our body with the bill that we see in the conference committee will decide if we go down that other path or not.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I do think that it is important that we understand the legal ramifications, because I do think a possible compromise here is each house does it its way. I've heard that from a number of people. And I want to know, does that have an effect on us? And the Senate, if we're.
I'll let it answer and the committee will do it, but as chairman, I'm not going down that path. I'm going to tell you, and I hate to disagree with a committee member, but my belief is I stand behind my body, and this is a committee bill. And the committee will do it, but I'll defer to the committee if we want to try to go to two bills, but.
This is pretty ironic.
Mr. Olbrich, go ahead and opine.
Mr. Chairman, as I understand Senator Scott's question, it's if the legislature passed two separate plans, a Senate plan that was within 10% deviation, population deviation for all the districts, and a House plan that was somewhere above 10% deviation, and what the courts would do if those plans were challenged. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I believe what a court would do is on the Senate plan, the presumption of constitutionality would still be possessed with that plan. So it'd be on the plaintiffs to prove that plan violated some aspect of the Constitution. With a plan that's above 10% deviation, the federal courts say that the defendants or the state bears the burden of proving that plan is rationally related to a legitimate state interest.
Mr. Olbrich, follow up. Is this a Senate plan or a Wyoming legislature plan that we're working on today? I mean, this is Senate committee, but are we working on a Senate plan, or are we trying to come up with what we always do, which is a bill that is a deal and it goes to conference? I understand it's going to go to conference. They're out of deviation. I understand that. But are we working on a Senate plan now, or are we working on a plan of the Wyoming legislature?
Oh, yeah, Mr. Chairman. So both the Senate and House plans are before you today.
Yes.
Hoping I'm not adding confusion, but clarity potentially. I think Mr. Obrick answered the question directly, but I think all of that is a moot point. Who would bring the action to the court? What would be the actual redistricting plan adopted into law that is to go into effect? And none of that would be clear. And so there would be no actual plan if there were two competing bills passed. So I don't understand logistically how that issue would get to the court. Otherwise, we would just turn it over to the court ahead of time to make a plan for us. So I just don't see that. But so I think this is all kind of a dangerous territory to go
I guess the
down.
question back is, I'm looking at a bill that's House Bill 100. We don't have a Senate bill in front of us. What we have is a House bill that's come to our side. The Senate bill is Senator Scott's bill. It's a backup. It is. It's still there. Let's work on the bill we have in front of us, and we'll see what the conference does. That's all I say is I've never seen us split a bill in half and say it turns into a Senate bill when it comes to our side. I've never seen that.
And Mr. Chairman, I am not proposing that. What was worrying about was really how badly a House plan out of deviation would affect the Senate if the whole thing winds up in court. And I got an answer I think I can rely on. And I think we ought to proceed to fix the whole bill, Mr. Chairman.
That's my intent, and if in conference it'll come and we'll decide if there's a bill or not. But to me, the cart's way ahead of the horse, because I thoroughly intend to come out of this committee with a bill in deviation. Very clear. This committee will come to one, the floor will come to one. So with that, we'll proceed on. I guess the next step, I'd like for Mr. Swank to put up where the two new House districts are at on here, just for a matter of explanation for the committee and for the body out there, because we do have two new House seats. And I'd like to see kind of where they ended up out of the House configured and what they look like.
I would like to see the comparable new Senate district.
Yes, sir.
Would you be a combination?
Absolutely, that's coming.
Mr. Chairman, I've shared my screen on the House engrossed version of Senate or House Bill 100. The new House districts, House District 62 is currently shown on the screen in, I guess, a yellow color. It is a shared district between Natrona and Converse counties. It's a little bit favored on the Natrona side in terms of population. The other House district that was added, number 61, is in Laramie County, and I'm pointing to it right now. I guess it's in an orange color, and it's located on the east side of Cheyenne. The comparable Senate districts, the way the bill currently reads, Senate or House District 62 would be paired with House District 6 in Converse County, where this would be the new Senate District 2. Senate District 2 used to be shared between Converse and Platte County, but as the new districts are in right near Natrona and Laramie, there has to be kind of a flow or a split between those two regions. So that would be new Senate District 2. The added Senate District 31 would now be paired based on the current bill draft, House District 4 in Platte County that goes into Laramie, and then House District 10 on the east side of Laramie County.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Swank? Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, please forgive me, but I'm still trying to figure out exactly what they did over there, our good friends, and how it proceeded, because I'm looking, and the amendment that's called the Crago Amendment, that was a committee of the whole amendment. It was the second amendment offered. The first amendment that was offered was a Duncan amendment, and that was also adopted. So I'm going to assume that that first amendment that was adopted was the reordering of the eastern part of the state. And then the second amendment, which was still on committee of the whole, was the Crago Amendment that worked up Sheridan County and brought it out of deviation. And so where I'd like to go, and I know we're going to hear public testimony, but I'd like to offer an amendment to reverse that. Okay. But I want to make sure there's all these other amendments in here, Mr. Swing, including another committee of the whole amendment by Burke. And then you've got second and third reading amendments. Looks like 4 more. So I'm getting maybe 7 amendments that passed. So the amendments that came later, did they affect the Crago Amendment in any way? Could we just take the Crago Amendment and reverse it and get to a place where maybe we come between both houses? Is that possible? And I'm just asking, not policy, but asking the physics of it.
Mr. Chairman, you are correct that the first 2 amendments in the House, there is only one, I guess, interplay between those 2, and that was House District 52.
Okay.
In the Duncan Amendment, that goes into Sheridan County, and the Crago Amendment, it is removed from Sheridan County. So the logistics would be to just reverse the Crago amendment and go back to what the map looked like from the Duncan amendment. And I believe you have an amendment that was requested by a member of this committee before you today to do exactly that.
It's in your package.
I understand. I'm just being
Mhm.
incredibly clear for myself. And then all the subsequent amendments are really of no consequence in the big picture of things. That's an unfair word, but the rest of the amendments could stand on their own. And there's 4 or 5 more.
Mr. Chairman, you are correct. The remaining amendments, there's one I believe Representative or Chairman Zwanitzer noted, there was a cleanup in Campbell County for House districts 31, 52, and 53 that just moved like 2 or 3 blocks. There was 3 amendments for Laramie County, or 2 for Laramie County that do not impact. They all comply with the Duncan amendment in terms of the Laramie County configuration. And then there were 2 in the Southwest. One was to, by my understanding, was to place an current legislator back within their district. They were inadvertently moved with the county clerk's changes. And then another cleanup to follow a precinct line in Sweetwater County. So all of those can stand on their own and would not be impacted by just reversing the Crago amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Other questions?
How about the public?
Well, we're about to start on public. We're there. We're ready to, whoever wants to come next testify. It is 8:46. So I'd appreciate it if you will start with legislators. Say whether you're in favor of it or what changes you'd like to see and where we're at, but keep it fairly punctual and you can just come up one at a time and give us your thoughts. Going once. Going twice. There we go.
Former chairman.
Former Chairman Ellaway, welcome. I am glad to see you come up. A little bit of wisdom will not hurt us.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Senators, I'm Pete Illaway. Tried to do this 10 years ago. I think we did a pretty good job. Some of you were on the committee. Others are new. I'm going to be probably out of order, but how many legislators did you save when you did this?
How many what?
Legislators. In other words, I know that when we did this 10 years ago, that was don't save any legislators, do the right thing. So I just asked the question. How many did you, so to speak, make the plan, and especially the 62-31 plan? How many legislators did you save to create the plan? Because I think Laramie County's probably messed up. And I think probably some other counties also have saved some legislators. And we're not supposed to save legislators. And we did that 10 years ago. It was a mistake. And I would say that was part of my problem as the chairman.
Chairman Ellaway, I'll try to answer and I'll let everyone correct me on what misstatements I make and missteps. So we went through about 40 plans and nearly all of them affected various legislators in different places. And we heard from them for various reasons, up and down. In the end, as far as I know, the only real deal is there was some attempt primarily down here in Laramie County, because we had pairings that were going to come together, that they worked within the region to try to see what happened. But by the way, one of our criteria is, it's not the highest, but one of them is to look at existing seats and not to affect them if you can help. That is one of the criteria of our plan when we did it. And it was not ever a high point of this committee. I can tell you as chairman, Chairman Zwanitzer will tell you the same thing. We requested that no seats be placed on any maps. and anything show as we did the original redistricting. It only appeared as it came up. I can tell you the I-80 corridor plan had some effects on it. And actually the one seat that we really saved as it went through it was Representative Paxton's seat. And as far as I know, he's not running again. We saved an empty seat because Rollins wanted representation. And that, best of my knowledge, flat honest with you, that's really kind of where it laid. Was I didn't personally, and committee can follow up on it, but there was comments about 2 senators and 2 representatives in Laramie County. Was the only one that we actually sat as a committee and talked about it all. And what the intent was is there's 10 seats, actually 10 plus seats down here. Was can you make it work? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Illaway, members of the public. Redistricting, right? One of the toughest tasks of the legislature. And I would challenge you to believe how you approach the concept of the legislature on redistricting. What frame of reference do you approach it with when you hear that the legislature is conducting redistricting? And I would bet it's with a great deal of skepticism and negativity. And that certainly has been our experience. In that no matter what this committee has attempted to do, and no matter the reasons we provide for why, there is always a negative response. And so there's just no overcoming that. The truth is, we presented a redistricting plan without legislative seats in mind. We did not. Certainly throughout the interim, we heard challenges from legislators and their constituents. We had a whole delegation come forward from Natrona County who wanted to make sure that Representative Gray stayed right where he was. And they wanted him as their representative, and any effort to manipulate that seat was seen as nefarious or something going on, right? Or legislators who experienced challenges to their own districts felt like that was an intentional action against them, right? Chairman Swanitzer up to something, certainly, right? And all of that you saw in the newspapers and all of that negativity that you've heard about, certainly there's mischief underfoot, right? Nonsense. Nonsense. Putting together a redistricting map is difficult, as you know. Yes, it appears that there's been compromises made to ensure that the people's vote continues to be heard based on putting some legislators back. You heard the House just say there was an amendment in the House for a Sweetwater representative. Not sure who that was. You heard concern. We had our original plan eliminated a House member here in Laramie County. It appears he's back in his seat. This is what happens when the legislature redistricts. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not here to decide, but I would push back that the committee did anything nefarious or mischievous to keep our seats. And in fact, if you look at my Senate district, I have lost an entire House district and about 60% of my current House district. In fact, I saw another plan being approached with me last night that would leave the only remaining district of mine would be my small neighborhood HOA, where the only people would have voted for me before is about 25. Maybe.
Well,
Maybe. I mean, do I object to that? Did I personalize that? I did not, right? And so even as a member of this committee, has agreed to a plan where I lose an entire House district and about 60% of my current House district. So I would push back heavily against any allegation that there's been anything done by this committee to protect itself. So with that said.
thank you, Senator. And I think it needed to come out, and I was sorry that I had to kind of get you guys to say something, because it needs to come out what you did and you didn't do. So I congratulate you on that. This is the toughest thing in the world. The population of Wyoming shifted. And I know that you have to start with the center of the state, the Native Americans, and then work from there. Because that's really, I mean, they have to have their own, so to speak. So I think you probably did work hard on it. I don't envy you as the population shifted, because if it shifted out of the Southwest to over here to the southeast or other areas? I know that, Chair. Senator Case. That was one of the toughest things we had to do together, was to work this redistricting. So thank you for your efforts, and thank you for stating what I hoped you would state.
Senator Scott.
Let me answer his question slightly differently. Two things. I personally believe that it is not the business of the legislature to decide which members are going to be members. That's the business of the voters. So I would be opposed to any deliberate attempt to put legislators out of the districts that they're been elected from. That's what the voters do, that sort of thing. Mr. Chairman, I think we don't know what we've entirely done with this new plan. And I am personally urging all the members of the Senate to see what's happened in their area and make sure we haven't made any mistakes. And I hope the LSO will accommodate us, senators coming to say, what's it done in my particular area? Because I think everybody ought to go look and ask. Mr. Chairman, that's my personal advice to all of the members of the Senate.
Mr. Chairman, I agree that the community of interest is absolutely important. Tough on the eastern side of the state, the way it is. I've tried not to say anything because I really haven't looked at it, but I know the efforts that you've made because of the population shift. And people really don't realize that the population did shift quite a lot from the west to the east.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a fact. And it also shifted from rural to urban. And you know, those factors are hard to hit.
It's changing, and we have to see that.
Thank you.
So thanks for your efforts, and thank you for answering that one question.
Thanks for the lead.
That
Committee, further questions? Thank you, Chairman Illaway. I appreciate your efforts 10 years ago. I didn't at the time, by the way. So anyone else from the public? Come on up. Mr. Winnie, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. As you cope with deviations, I would ask you to tuck away a thought. I don't know that there's a good answer to it, but I've come to realize there are orphan precincts. An orphan precinct is a precinct that is so small, a couple hundred voters, maybe even less than that, that get bounced around like a ping pong ball to make the numbers come out right in a larger district. Up until 10 years ago, Alpine, Wyoming was one of those. Then 10 years ago with the redistricting, Bondurant, where I live, and Daniel got booted off the island of Sublette County into District 22, making the numbers right. I don't know that I have a fix to offer you, but what happens is those districts are so small, or the precincts are so small, that the legislators naturally don't end up having to pay very much attention to them because there's a much larger one. Like I said, I don't know that I have a fix, but if you tuck the thought away, I'd appreciate it. Subject to your questions. Thank you.
Question for Mr. Winnie. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, responding to that, I think you've put your finger in one of the real problems. And frankly, I think the courts have shown quite a bit of wisdom here. You're always going to have some of that, just trying to fit the population into what our numbers of legislators turn out to be. You're always going to have some odd precincts that are represented by somebody from a different community who knows that they don't depend on that block of people to get reelected and really doesn't have the contact with them they would somebody in their home community. If the courts allowed widespread deviation to accommodate those, is what you'd have to have, you would lose the equality of population. And by giving us a 5% plus or minus deviation, the courts have helped us keep that within reason, but it's going to be a feature, I'm afraid, of every districting plan that we can write. And about all we can do is try to hold it down. I can't remember, since we were forced to the single member district, I can't remember a circumstance where we haven't had what you've called orphan precinct. And I haven't seen a plan that can do without them. Mr. Chairman, this is a part of running a democracy, a representative democracy that we have the least good solutions to. And the courts plus or minus 5%, I think, has been a reasonable way for us to deal with things. But without that, I'm afraid it would be manipulated to favor particular groups. So I think the courts basically have got this one right. And I don't think we have much say in it anyhow, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, that's why I say I don't really have a fix to offer you. And I merely ask you to tuck the thought away. I understand Senator Scott's words.
You see the difference on the committee, because
Yes, sir.
I'm on a different side and I'm not going to argue it. So
Yes, sir. That's why I simply say tuck the thought away.
thank you. Further testimony. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Sabrina King, and I want to be clear that I'm not here representing any particular organization today. I was approached back in September by the folks in South Cheyenne that have been advocating very hard for their community of interest. I will say, and the reason I wanted to testify, I've been asked by those folks who are mostly working today to testify to kind of explain what happened in the southern part of Cheyenne. Because if you pull it up and if you look at it, it does not look how folks want it to look. The reason it looks that way is because despite the folks in South Cheyenne having spoken with both representatives that the preferred map would affect, we were not able to get the map to the place that we wanted because there are two representatives who would be put in the same district if you draw the lines the way that they should be drawn, in the opinion of the folks in South Cheyenne in that county. So the way that Laramie County looks right now on that southern part, there's a little boot that comes down and grabs kind of a part of the county. That is not how the folks in South Cheyenne would prefer that looks. So the fix is quite easy, and I'm happy to discuss what that fix looks like. It actually makes 12, 42, and 43 make a lot more sense, frankly. But the reality is that map does put two current sitting House representatives in the same district. And our folks in South Cheyenne were told time and time again that was simply not an acceptable thing to have happen, despite the fact that in reality, when you look at the map and when you look at what it looks like right now versus what it could look like, the map does make a lot more sense. The communities of interest make more sense if you draw it in the way that does in fact put those two representatives in the same district. I know that is a hard decision to make. I believe there is one other in Albany County right now where two House reps are put in the same district. It happens. So the folks in South Cheyenne would ask that the Senate consider re-examining that portion of the map. It would be a very small, very simple fix, but we believe that it would actually genuinely be better for Laramie County. So I'm happy to discuss that further and answer any questions about that.
Questions, committee?
Mr. Chairman, can we see it on the map?
Definitely.
Maybe the witness could point to what we're talking about here. I see the boot.
So 43 right now is this sort of green area. There's a little piece of that around Fox Farm College that really should be in 12. And then around South Greeley, there's another part that should be in 12. Those two parts actually have pretty significant populations. Those really should be in the South Cheyenne district. This little boot that comes down here, that is where a House representative lives. There is a way, and I this is not helpful, but you can see it. But in reality, what is east of the South Greeley Highway should be in 42. What is west of South Greeley Highway should be in 43. You can then consolidate that northern part into 12. And that would give South Cheyenne those two districts. And then you would have a rural 42 and a rural 43 district. Again, it's a very simple fix, but it does cut off above where you would have another representative.
Thank you. Have you put a plan together that actually fits within the deviation and done it?
It does fit within deviation and it nominally changes this map. It doesn't affect anything that any of the other amendments did in terms of the eastern side of the state, whatever happened in the northern part of the state. It literally would only affect 3 districts. It affects 43, 12, and 42, and that's it.
Did you come into any of the clerk's meetings? Go ahead, Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The way the Corporations Committee bill that was adopted before as amended by the House, was that acceptable to South Cheyenne?
So the original 6231 map, that was acceptable to South Cheyenne. When that got changed by the Duncan Amendment, the changes went all the way down into South Cheyenne and it split it off even worse than this into 4 completely different places. So the original 6231 map was acceptable to South Cheyenne. Once the Duncan Amendment was put into place, it was a bit of a scramble to try to consolidate up again.
Follow up, Senator Nethercott.
Oh, Goshen County. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. If you want to present that, we can take a look at it. It won't happen today, I can tell you that, but there's 3 readings coming up. Work your legislators, and I'm happy to sit and visit with you on the side as well.
Thank you. Committee and folks will certainly be in touch. So thank you for your
Thank you.
time.
Further testimony out of the audience? Further testimony? Further testimony? I believe we have a couple people online. Do they have their hands? If they'd raise their hands if they want to testify. If not, we're gonna go just a tiny bit to give them a chance and we'll end public testimony. I do, please. Okay, public testimony is closed. Committee, what is your pleasure?
To pass.
Okay, bills do pass. Discussion. I have an amendment to come and there may be more, but just forewarning that the amendment I've got is what undoes and puts back in deviation the Sheridan Johnson. And I apologize to the folks there. We don't know how to fix it other than to put back to deviation. So we'll start with that and it goes out over to everybody. If they want to fix it, they're going to have to come with a plan that's in deviation. This committee's been really hard, but that's where we're staying. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, before we get to the amendments, I would like to see on the, what would be Senate District 31, I believe that's the new one on this plan that runs across, what is partly Laramie County, partly Platte County now. Is it just those, Mr. Chairman, first question, is it just those 2 counties?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. The Laramie County no longer shares with Goshen.
Okay. What percentage is in each county of the population?
One moment, I believe it's in your packet there, but I'll double check real quick.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the Laramie County is at about 52% and Platte County is about 48%.
Mr. Chairman. I don't know how the people and their representatives from this part of the world feel about that. My instinct is that that's going to be a very difficult district for anybody to represent because of the nearly even split between a very rural county and a much more populous county. And I don't know the balance. I don't know the local geography well enough to know what the
Mr. Swank.
urban rural balance is
Mr.
within
Chairman.
Cheyenne.
Can you pull that map up again so we can look how much is rural and urban? Senator Boner.
Yeah, and so that's been the situation I've been in for the past 7 years. It's remarkably similar to the current split in Senate District 2, where it's about 55% Commerce County, 45% Platte County. We like focusing on the differences between our counties in this committee in this process. So I'd say, obviously, Commerce County is mineral rich. What's representatives say, Platte County is mineral deficient. And so, yeah, we can always look at how challenging or, look at our differences, but there's a lot that unites those two counties. I look at that map, we say it might be a little awkward driving through Cheyenne, either, from Pine Bluffs to Wheatland, one way or the other, but they're all rural areas. I've spent plenty of time in Eastern Laramie County in the missile field. And having represented Platte County for the past 7 years, I think there are some similarities. So I think that we've done the best that we can to have a solid community of interest there. I think Representative Duncan can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was really important that House District 10 kind of stayed well outside the city limits of Cheyenne. So you really have a true agricultural community of interest. And there's a difference between that and somebody with 5 acres, which is outside the city limits. No judgment one way or the other on it. Hey, but there are differences. Yeah, from my experience of, representing Platte County for all this time, I think it's a pretty decent community of interest, probably the best that we can do, and certainly recognizing that there's always going to be drawbacks. Like I said, the sheer size of the district from Pine Bluffs up to Glendale is significant, but maybe not the most significant Senate district we have in terms of the geographic size.
Mr. Chairman.
Here's another cut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I currently represent all of that right there that you see in orange. So Senator Boner and I we have shared boundaries. My district goes all the way up to Platte County. So just another piece of my current House district that I'm losing. Gosh, I think I made this map. So that, my current House district then is the green. So I would be giving up all of that area to that new district. And I love Chugwater chili. And it seems to be just fine, right? I think
Further comments on that end of it? Did you get answered well enough, Senator Scott?
Mr. Chairman, what I'm hearing is a lack of enthusiasm on at least the representatives of the people involved for doing anything different. And okay, I'm not, Mr. Chairman, I can count votes.
Very good. Committee, further discussion on the bill.
You ready for amendments?
Excuse me. I'm going to back up and let you come comment. I did it and I didn't catch it. If you want to comment, I'm certainly going to. Committee, any objections? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep it quick. So looking at it, obviously Platte County is 8,500 people. It'll always be the minority until it grows. And so that's just the understanding in a Senate district. With that being said, though, unless you split it into multiple different counties and multiple different areas. But one of the things I think that's really important to understand is you consider Platte County and that area of Laramie County are very much the same concept. It's ranching country and farming country. And so I believe that if anything, maybe it's slightly better in converse because it isn't the oil gas industry that is that different dynamic being brought in. So I think to answer your question, Senator Scott, I believe that it's a good fit. Obviously, there's some geographic aspects to it, but there's no mountain ranges. There's just a lot of flat prairie. So
thank you. Questions for
Answers.
Representative Harold? Okay, thank you. We're back on it. I believe with Senator Case.
So, Mr. Chairman, as I understand the amendment you had prepared, it simply undoes the Crago Committee of the Whole amendment. So I would like to offer that amendment this time.
Thank you. That's exactly what it does. It goes back to the committee position. It brings in Arvada, Clearmont, that area back in there and puts it back in with Campbell County to bring them in deviation. Question called. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Amendments passed. We're back on the bill for the Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to open up the South Cheyenne issue. I truly would. I think we've got enough to do an amendment. If that amendment doesn't affect anything else, can we at least talk about it? So I would move it.
We've got to see it, I think. Yeah, we have to see it. I believe if we're going to move it. I have two thoughts. One, if she has a map here and Mr. Swank can pull it up, we can talk about it. Or my preference would be to bring it on one of the three readings coming forward so everybody can look at it and understand it. But I'm more than game. An amendment is in order as long as we have one that's in deviation.
Fair enough. Can we see it? And so, Mr. Chairman, I just think it's better that we do things in the committee. Put it in the best
All in
shape.
favor of it, we can get in order.
Okay.
Thank you. Any discussion while we're waiting? Burn time. Preferably.
I'll just take a call from Ron's Flooring. It's not about.
Mr. Swank is, sure. I have an amendment that does this prepared.
You have,
Yeah, so if I can. speak
Senator
to Mr.
Nethercott
Swank.
has one prepared, Mr. Swank. She says that she thinks does it.
So just for clarification, Mr. Yes.
Someone move back to the desk.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
this is the amendment I was received yesterday that I believe partly explains the South Cheyenne area. I'll let Representative Wanitzer or Senator Nethercott.
All right, committee. Senator Nethercott, yours at this point. Would you like to kind of explain what it does and the effects?
I'd love to, Mr. Chairman. So the majority of these amendments came from our clerk doing a number of fixes based on where the Laramie County District sat after it came out of the House. And so most of those are well, all of them are cleanups as it relates to what this plan looks like. I don't have a full appreciation of and so I just had the amendment prepared. I just shifted off to have the amendment prepared to LSO of what it does to, and I would prefer just to have an open conversation about this, Representative Stivar's area. And so what we know, what
Would
came
you
out.
come up, Representative Stivar, because you're going to be able to comment before we're done. We're what?
Wait.
Any comment is welcome. This is what we've dealt with the committee and we're really happy. I'm going to let her finish explaining.
Just if I could
And
just,
then we're going to allow some comments from the folks that live in the area. Continue, Senator Nethercott.
great. So I will push back on any effort from anyone not living in Laramie County to try to fix Laramie County. So let's just start there. Laramie County legislators in the room? Yes. So this came from the clerk yesterday. I received yesterday afternoon and just shifted off to LSO to have an amendment prepared and asked Mr. Swank to have a map prepared so we could look at it and fully understand it. So first time I'm really seeing the map too this morning for purposes of clarity. We know there's been a lot of conversation concerning South Cheyenne and the proposed amendments and how that might affect those two House members who currently reside in that area. Very difficult to come up with a plan that addresses those concerns. And in fairness, I don't have a clear understanding of how this particular map affects Representative Stivar. So for full transparency and disclosure, Representative Stivar fortunately is here and he can tell us exactly how this map affects his district, and you can choose to proceed how you want with that information. Because I don't know where Representative Stivar lives.
Thanks, Senator Nethercott. And I second the motion that we're going to listen to who lives here, not anyone else, at least from my end. So I'm actually going to go to you next if you'd like,
Mr.
Representative
Chairman,
Stivar, and feel free to long as you're not using profanity, you can tell us whatever you like.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, Representative Stiver, House District 12. This puts me back in going against another incumbent, which is Representative Blackburn. The first map that came out that kept me in my district on the bottom half from I-80, or from I-80 South, Albany County to 85. The clerk just took a partial corner off at the top and put it, I believe, in the Representative Martinez's District 44, because the South has grown up. And that's all my comments. We can talk offline, Senator.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr.
Right.
Chairman. And so Ms. King, who represents a constituency from the South Cheyenne, who is advocating for a different plan that addresses the South Cheyenne's concern, does this map address those concerns? And if so, can you explain to everyone how and why it does that?
Senator Nethercott, my understanding, and in full disclosure and transparency, I don't live in Laramie County. I am simply advocating for the folks who are not able to be here today. Their goal is to keep, for the most part, the Orchard Valley, South Greeley, Fox Farm College, and then that central part around what is in currently Romero Martinez's district in 2 districts. So if I understand this correctly, it looks like there's a little lone pocket of green above Fox Farm College, so I don't know what that is. But otherwise, my understanding of what the folks in South Cheyenne have been advocating for, this would fit. But I, of course, would want to go, I mean, they would need to see this, but it does include the 4 core components that they've been advocating for. So South Greeley, Orchard Valley, the LCCC college area, and then that central part of South Cheyenne. So
Ms.
this
King,
does include those
couple
areas.
questions. One, where do you live? And is the group organized that you represent? And how many is it? Is it 10, 100, 1,000, 5,000?
Yeah. I actually live about half an hour south of Lander. So I live right outside of Atlantic City, is where my home base is.
How did you come to represent South Cheyenne?
I've worked with folks in South Cheyenne for quite some time on various different issues, both through my work and otherwise. But the groups that have been advocating include the NAACP, Juntos, the Wyoming Independent Citizens Coalition, and a few other groups that actually originally started organizing in South Cheyenne to get their own seat on the school board. So that's really how a lot of this started. So a couple of years ago, they were able to organize to ensure that South Cheyenne, which had never had representation on the school board before, would have school board representation. And they've continued that advocacy in this work.
And Mr. Chairman, if I
Senator
can,
Nethercott.
the Laramie County legislators are familiar with the South Cheyenne constituency that is advocating for this. They have appeared at every single one of our public meetings with prepared maps and plans. They have made significant communications to the legislators concerning this issue. And I think for purposes of session, I think they all have day jobs and recognize this issue was coming into session and sought professional assistance in presenting this issue. So it's a real constituency that exists in Laramie County that is pushing for this. It's not made up. A couple of questions that I see some of my committee members, if we can shift to Mr. Swank briefly. There does seem to be some unusual pockets in there. I see a little orange square, the green square and the purple square. And is that intentional or does that just need, I don't know, what is that?
Mr. Chairman, the kind of reddish line, I guess, reddish purplish line here, these are what is the current engrossed plan. Those are the boundaries. I believe this color is just a little bit not quite scaled to transparency, but this is most right here is most of the orange color for what would be proposed House District 44. This blue would be proposed House District 12, and then this green would be House District 43 that comes into this east side of the South.
So Mr. Swank, for clarity, because of my amendment I'm trying to present, that area right above that green, is there an island or not?
Mr. Chairman, there is no island. The green does come through here. This district right here, that would be from the current engrossed plan. I just did not get it transparent enough.
That's it. And maybe Representative Swanson have anything to follow up.
I just want to talk maybe if I could about the clerk amendment. So that pink you see, the city of Cheyenne annexed a portion of that. So there are 5 or 6 people in that pink area that live in the city of Cheyenne that we're gonna, that further to the west, Mr. Swink, in that kind of huge new addition, not a lot of people, but due to Cheyenne's annexations the last 6 years, our clerk did want those people put into what's District 44, that red district. On the south side, we've tried diligently, or where the clean breaks are, is Representative Romero Martinez's district is 44, that red color, that's all in the city limits of Cheyenne. And you see that other little pink square, that's also in the city limits. Part of the issue with the amendment, right above that is a very large apartment complex of 700 people. And our clerk was gonna have to make it its own precinct. Not 700 voters, but 700 people. And so that kind of necessitated all the other changes. That new gray-green box, the gray box, there's 3 people who live in there, one of which is our, well, a person you would all know who is a former member of this body, and her family. That green cuts into the only other city precinct, kind of where the green and the red and the pink all meet. So the new blue, the blue district, House District 12, that is all, from my understanding, county now. And so that's where the split is throughout the interim tried to really be. For the south side, there's kind of the right number of people for a city district, and then the South Cheyenne Sewer Water together. But it does make sense when our clerk went through and had to look at the city county boundaries. Same thing for the purple district, that's House District 11. From the current map, we extended that west all the way out to that kind of weird castle looking thing. That's Little America, which is in the city limits of Cheyenne. And we had to pick up about 8 people. So again, it's really because of 2,200 people that we weren't necessarily expecting with the Duncan Amendment, all being put into Laramie County. The previous maps, we had never had the Platte County 600 in the northwest part of our county, right? So none of our maps anticipated the population right there. So in moving everything around on kind of short notice on 3 readings, we did our best. And then our county clerk, after it moved over to the Senate, said, hey, there's another 12 areas of concern, one of which Representative Nethercott alluded to earlier that we didn't think was best to put her in a 1%, 1% of her current Senate district. But so a lot of those changes in the south side are reflective of population shifts, but also what our county clerk recommended for the city county precincts. I'm happy to answer any questions about that, Mr. Chairman.
Question for Mr. Co-Chairman. Senator Boner.
Yeah, Mr. Just in general, for either our Laramie County representatives or senators, if we just zoom out so we can just see how everything's affected, I think that'd be useful for me. And obviously, I'm a little concerned, or not concerned, want to see what, House District 10 looks like, all that. So would be safe to say that all the changes are within the Cheyenne area, that 44 and that 10 aren't changing a whole lot, the lines there.
Here's they're all in Laramie County.
And Mr. Chairman, I mean, in full disclosure, that area right where Mr. Swank's cursor is, there's a former member of the House who moved out there, who has run for a seat, and he happened to be in the chamber yesterday. And so the discussion was if we were doing something nefarious to put him into a different district because we knew he'd be running for office. That is certainly not my intention. Again, the zip code line kind of goes right through there in a weird place that doesn't align with census blocks.
We're comfortable with what we're doing.
Yeah, so
I just want to see the whole map. That's all I wanted.
There's just a lot of large census
Motion or
blocks
further
up.
comments?
Well, I think we've discussed it, or at least it's been explained. I'll move it for purposes of discussion to see, the primary concern is that it does put 2 House members, again, 2 incumbents against each other. And so that's a problem.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to comment on this, that I find it impossible to correlate from the maps we're seeing to what little I know of the physical geography of what's out there. And I haven't seen anything in any of these that, you know, is not contiguous or is reaching out into a particular island or anything. So, Mr. Chairman, my instinct is to rely on the work that Laramie County has done and not to try to tinker with it here. But partly that's, I have not found an ability to correlate any of these maps in the urban areas that we see. I didn't at Trona County because our county had a very good GIS system that produced much larger scale that could be figured out. But these maps, I have great difficulty.
Thank you. You
understanding.
live there. I think that was part of the,
Yeah,
back
that was
to the
part of the
audience, we did a regionalization plan, and basically most of these plans were developed on a local basis so that we snapped the pieces in. That's just for edification. Anybody that's watching is nearly everything was local driven that's in this plan. We snapped them in, but if you live in Northeast Wyoming or Southwest Wyoming or Southeast Wyoming, it was that area that did their own planning. So they knew where the hill was at and where the urban and rural areas change and where different demographics hit. So more discussion on the Senator Boner.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to support this amendment this time. I think time and again, we've seen, everybody advocates for everything that they want. And when the committee chooses, gives one group of people, whether it be Weston County versus, Campbell County, there's all sorts of, iterations we've seen. I get uncomfortable when we give one group everything that they ask for at the expense of someone else. I think that they've made good work to accommodate South Cheyenne. It's not everything that they want, but I just don't feel comfortable when there's other folks within Laramie County who are opposed to this plan.
Mr.
Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate thoughts of the committee. I think you're kind of loud and clear. So I think we should just move on.
Won't bother bringing it to a vote. We're back to the bill. Any further thoughts or amendments before we come to a vote?
Question on the bill.
Question called. Roll call.
On House Bill 100 engrossed, Senator Boner. Senator Case,
Aye.
Senator Nethercott, Senator Scott,
Aye.
Chairman Driscoll.
Aye.
On House Bill 100 engrossed, 5 ayes, do pass amended.
Oh. Go ahead. Yeah, we had it without it. You helped. Thank you. Senate File 50 is our next bill up. Welcome, Senator James. Note that you made the top of the list out of 9 bills coming, so. You have the floor. We've got about 20 minutes left, so if we can kind of head right off and go into it, I'd appreciate it. Senator James, you have the floor, and there's nobody watching anymore. You're free.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you Senate File 50, this third year trying, so third time's a charm. This is government waste, fraud, and abuse, and whistleblower protection. Start off, 30 states currently have some form of fraud hotline in one way or another. I would also like to lead off with some examples of situations that have happened within our state which justify this type of legislation. So in the Department of Health, we had a few cases where that involved children and foster homes, that children in their foster homes were being placed within mental health facilities, and the foster parents continued gathering paychecks for those kids. They kept those kids there even though they were told by professionals in the mental health facilities that they did not belong there, and that situation kept occurring. There was also a situation in Green River where a fire chief embezzled money from their fire department foundation. There was also a situation on the Board of Nursing where one of the former directors gave away over $100,000 worth of licenses. And it was presented to our current governor and nothing was ever done about that as well. And those are just a few things that this bill could have prevented if this was put in line, because could have been an audit done as well as referred to DCI if it warranted. So I had LSO do some research. They reached out to 24 different states that currently have hotlines. And basically what the average hours that were used to investigate fraud was between 463 hours and about 630 hours. There was also one state that did provide an estimate of a biennial cost, which was only about $121,000. So, and there was also a range of states. There was also some states that provided how many complaints they received. It ranges anywhere from 81 to 439. Also, you'll notice that I didn't put any appropriation for any employees for the Department of Audit. Reason being is because the state that had the largest amount of complaints also has about 12.67 million people, and they didn't hire anyone extra. And they run it just fine. But I leave it up to you guys if you wish to appropriate money for an extra individual as the Department of Audit has requested, but that's the reason why I did not. Fraud lines are extremely effective. You're about 3 times more likely to find the amount of fraud with a fraud hotline than without. And that normally comes from tips, which is about 50% of how they're detected. So from there, we'll go ahead and move on to the bill. It hasn't really changed much. I kept all the amendments when I brought it the first time that were put in there. I haven't changed any of that. But when it died last year, there were some questions brought up, and so I would like to address those. So one of the questions was if this sidesteps the current criminal process. And this, after speaking with LSO, this does not sidestep any criminal process. This allows everyone their rights to have that process done for them. Also in here, one thing I did add was that if someone is convicted of fraud, a crime, after they're convicted, they will lose their protection under the Wyoming Governmental Claims Act, which I feel is important because if you're committing a crime on the people's clock and with the people's money, then you shouldn't have that protection. So, and it does require a report to the governor and to the legislature as well. I felt that was important, as we should know what's going on, what the ROI is of this, and what they're actually finding. I think that is very important. And then from there, I also provide the protection for the whistleblower. I added a couple, some wording. I included intimidate and harass, as that tends to happen when there's situations do arise. I also make sure to include that there's a chain of command that people can go to. So for instance, if it does happen in the executive branch or the governor's office, then they have another option to another person they can report to, which in this case, that case would be the Secretary of State. So for the whistleblower protection, another concern that came up is if false reporting. If that does happen where someone knowingly does a false report, then that person would be subject to disciplinary action up to and including dismissal. Another very important thing that I thought to add in this is to include, to make sure that a poster of some sort of notification be placed within governmental buildings where not only the public could see how to report information, but government employees would also know how to contact the hotline. So with that, I stand for any questions.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman. The place where I suspect the state's seeing the greatest actual fraud is in the Medicaid program. The history there, at about the time the Affordable Care Act passed, the federal government had been policing Medicaid eligibility very vigorously, and they entirely ceased doing that. And I think there was a great relaxation in the verification, and that I've started getting a lot of complaints about people showing up and being on Medicaid program, showing up in various medical facilities that were clearly not. Now, the trouble is the Medicaid eligibility is very complicated. So the average citizen could well be deceived as to whether somebody was properly on Medicaid or not. But I think there's quite a bit of problem there. Does this bill reach that kind of a situation where you're going to hear quite a bit from the public, but you are dealing with a very complex eligibility situation, Mr. Chairman, that's not being very well policed by the agency? Does this address that kind of circumstance at all, Mr. Chairman?
Senator James.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, yes, it does. How it does that is when you set this fraud hotline, whether it be through email or telephone, the Department of Audit has the ability to filter out what they see as what warrants investigation and what does not. Whether that person, these people provide the evidence to warrant that investigation, that would be up to the Department of Audit to determine that. And then if it's out of their realm, they can filter it over to DCI if they feel that it's out of their area of expertise. But it's how this turns out is based on where the Department of Audit sends it.
Thank you. Is there another comment?
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think the answer to that, Senator Scott, is no. There's a Medicaid Fraud Control Act, which you might recall voting on recent years, that I brought updating those laws. And so I think what this bill is intending to address is not whether or not citizens of the state of Wyoming are properly within the Medicaid coverage program and then taking criminal actions against them, but rather against state employees who are committing waste, fraud, or abuse. And so that's, I think, what the purpose of this bill is. You know, secondarily, uniquely, the bill, I think, unfortunately, has a number of fatal flaws in it from my perspective, primarily as it relates to the role of the Attorney General in this. The Attorney General represents all of these state agencies. And so to have them flip and turn as the prosecutor in these cases, the Department of Audit, furthermore, is not a criminal investigative agency. And so they would become part of a criminal investigation unit, essentially, which really doesn't exist. I think that's problematic. References to the Governmental Claims Act certainly are inappropriate within this bill because there are no exceptions to the Governmental Claims Act for waste, fraud, or abuse. And I just think the intention here is laudable, but there are many fundamental flaws in the bill that I see it being unworkable, Mr. Chairman, due to the time that limit my comments there.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, actually, yes, this is Governmental Claims Act is used in 9-3-443 Echo under the Retirement Board. So it is referenced there that they do have the ability to lose their protection under that. And that's the way it was explained to me from LSO. Now, as far as the reporting aspect of it, if it's concerning public money and it's individuals doing it, then this would still be a way to report it. And yes, the Department of Audit is actually part of criminal investigations when there's fraud suspected. Because when they do audits now currently and they find it, then if I'm not mistaken, they are still part of it, or they turn it over to DCI, which is well within their ability in this bill.
So, James, I've got a couple of questions. We go to page 7, you define abuse, and I'm really curious. We had numbers of cases in my county. I'm looking at my clerk where one, you have big cases that happen on different levels. We go down to the level of somebody plowing somebody's driveway with a state plow, which I've seen actually happen, and use of county gravel inappropriately by a county employee, a couple buckets of it. And the way I see it under this, if they end up prosecuted, they no longer can work for the government and they lose their job. And I'm curious to see what your thoughts of, should there be some level in there? I mean, it's convicted of a deal, and I understand we're trying to get there, but there's some kind of inadvertent cases. We got the glaring ones. You've got weed and pest problems and county clerks and different things that happen. But then we have some pretty low level ones, and they're pretty innocent. I can tell you, like I say, the one that comes to my mind is our state highway plow driver plowed out all the little old ladies' houses in Hewlett. He doesn't work there anymore, so I don't have to throw him under the bus, but he plowed out all their houses and nearly got fired over it. And easily could have been where he could lost his pension, never worked for the state. How does this bill provide any flexibility in those cases?
Mr. Chairman, so on page 5, subsection echo, it says no person convicted of a crime. So they'd have to be actually convicted of a crime to actually lose their job. That's the situation right there. And I don't know if what they did, the amount of waste of whether it be the fuel or additional wear and tear on the equipment or the gravel, if that would be a crime, but you have to actually be convicted of a crime for any of this stuff to take place. Does that help, Mr. Chairman?
Not really. Follow up. Anybody? Senator Scott.
You're fairly persuasive because in the nature of things, state employees are going to do favors for people that need them. And plowing out an old lady's driveway is exactly the kind of thing that they will do. And I don't want to see people prosecuted for that sort of thing. That's just being a decent neighbor. And that's how they're going to look at it.
Well, we've had prosecutions over gravel. That I can tell you.
It depends on whether or not I like them.
And it depends if the county attorney likes it. This is an interesting path. And I guess for 122,000, what are we buying for 122,000, Senator James? Because we're talking about what the bill intends to do. But for 122,000, what are we buying?
Well, that, Mr. Chairman, 122,000 is up to you guys if you want to put it in there. I didn't put it in there because I don't feel they need the extra employees since the state with 12.67 million people didn't need to hire anyone else. And we only have barely 600,000.
Okay, I'll back up. What do you think this bill should cost? And where is it at? Because I'm going to sideboard the bill for you. And I'm going to put a cost in it that's a limit. So tell me what you think this is going to cost.
It shouldn't cost any more than a phone line and setting up an email. I mean, that's all it really should cost. An additional employee, I don't feel it needs it. So I mean.
Suicide hotline was $1.5 million.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that requires a 24/7 staff of, I don't know how many individuals. This could take one person, if that, and they could be cross-trained on how to.
Give me a number so I can do an amendment and talk about your bill.
Well, I don't know, maybe 10,000, maybe
Okay.
at most.
I'm good then. Thank you. That solves it. Anyone else? Further comments? Questions? Okay, do we have any legislators or government people? Come on up. We're going pretty fast. We're 9:49, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Justin Chavis, Director of the Department of Audit. And so I just wanted to provide some comments on how this bill would impact our agency and give some information relative to the good senator's conversation on whether or not we need an additional person. I would say relative to our peers, we are a very small audit shop. The section that would be responsible for implementing this bill is 6 people. Those 6 people have the responsibility for producing the annual cost of government report. It's about 4,000 hours worth of work that goes into that. They're responsible for doing performance measures of state agencies. They're responsible for auditing approximately 60 towns and 455 special districts. So that's quite the responsibility for 6 people. I would suspect, not knowing what state the good senator was talking about, I would suspect that state has far more personnel in their audit shop than we do. Even if you look to our north, state of Montana, that is geographically, demographically similar to Wyoming, they have more than twice the number of auditors that we do. And, you know, when you're talking about adding additional work, it's like an economy of scale. The larger your office already is, the easier it is to take on more work without additional people. We are very, very small. Our resources are already pretty strained for the responsibility that we have. And I think this bill would add more work than the senator thinks it would. We currently do fraud work. We work on probably a handful a year. The good senator mentioned that the lowest number of complaints was 80. So we're going to go from working on 5 a year to 80. That's going to be a significant amount of work to bring those in, look at them, decide whether or not they have merit, and forward those on that do have merit. I would also suspect that most other states don't do a lot in terms of actual fraud investigations. Again, I would turn to Montana, which is similar to Wyoming. They don't do a lot of investigation themselves. We do. Law enforcement contacts us regularly to help out with fraud investigations. So I think without additional personnel, we further strain our resources, and then something has to give. Most likely we would be doing fewer audits. And I would submit that if you're trading resources away from audits that look to be a preventative measure in terms of identifying internal control weaknesses and recommendations to fix that, if you're shifting resources from that to a detective measure like a fraud hotline, you're weakening your overall risk posture. Not to say that a fraud hotline can't provide value, but if you're shifting resources from preventative to a detective, then I think, like I say, you're weakening your risk posture.
Thank you. We're at 9:53. We're going to real quickly question you. This will be late, or I'm going to give 10 minutes to this bill at our next meeting. We got 3 more bills coming out, or we can potentially get there now. My question to you is, how many people would it take to do 80 to 100 cases? And how much money are we going to lose off audits if we're not doing audits in between? So I want to balance what the actual costs are to implement this bill in your eyes on 80 to 100 cases, and what the costs are in lost audits if we don't add positions.
Mr. Chairman, I would say it would somewhat depend on the nature of those 80 to 100 cases. If there's a lot of them that don't have merit and they're just ended at that point, versus if a lot of them have merit and they end up being
just hypothetically, I get where you're at, but I need to know.
To do 80 to 100 cases a year, I don't know that the one person we're asking for would be sufficient to deal with 80 to 100 cases a year. You're talking, for current work in terms of fraud that we work on, you're probably looking at an average of 400 or 500 hours per case in terms of fraud cases that we work on. So, you know, if you extrapolate that out at 100 of them, it's thousands of hours and multiple people that would be required to handle those
Three, 4, 5 more positions.
easily.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Senator Case.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't know about that. I just got to think about that some more. It just seems to me that we're allowing people to contact and report something. We're setting up a structure for that. I don't know how we can really say it could be a lot of work. That'd be bad if it was, but it also mean we had some bad juju out there. So 5 more people, I'm not there. Sorry.
Eddie. Thank you. Real quickly, anyone else? We may get to a vote if not. Mr. Winnie, come on up.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County.
1 minute.
I'll be quick, honest. I support the bill. I think it's quite important. And this is based on my experience of some years ago when I reported misuse of a state-funded position in a school district. And the system's response when I reported it by letter with documentary evidence or with written evidence of it was they called the key person involved and said, "Did you do this?" And that person said no, and they said, "That's good enough for me." And so I believe it's important for the legislature to take a hard-nosed look at things like this. Given Mr. Chavez' words there, it looks pretty much like you're going to have to consider adding people to his organization. I did investigations in a number of cases in my time active duty in the Navy. I got the concept, subject to your questions. Thank you.
9:56, we're going to adjourn. We're going to be back. You can come back first thing and we'll go from there. But I've let us run to